And we are live and on the air. Ed Dyer, and this is the TWIS Minion Science Island Hangout. Joining me, we have Justin Jackson. Hello, Justin.
Hello.
And we have a new visitor. We got Jay.
Hey.
Jay joining us. How you doing, Jay?
I'm good. How about you?
We got generations. I'm the old guy. I'm the old bear. We got Justin, the middle-aged bear, and then we got Jay. Jay, the young baby bear.
So, wait, is my porridge too cold or too hot? I can't remember. I know nobody ate it, which is cool, but I don't remember what temperature my porridge is. So what do we got on the docket? We got a ton. You got a whole lot of Earth Day oriented, save the planet, good things that we can be that are going on in favor of the planet. This is what we need. We need the good news in light of all the negative global warming news we've been hit with lately.
I can give you. Well, let's start with the really good news. San Francisco. San Francisco has mandated. They come out with an ordinance. Actually, they had a previous ordinance. And let me screen share this story for you. And our friend Tree Hugger and the city by the bay. Now, their plan is to go 100% renewable electric by 2025. That's not that far in the future.
Nope.
Wow. And they passed this ordinance, and it's 15% of a building's roof. Originally, it had to be solar ready. With the new ordinance, you have to actually put solar panels there. So 15% of the roof space must now be devoted to solar panels. Really a great first step. The things you have to do. Go ahead.
So real quick, it looks like, just reading over this quickly, this is only going to be on buildings with less than 10 floors and only on new construction. Now, San Francisco is an ancient city in terms of California cities, and real estate has a premium. There has been, and this is sort of addressing, there has been sort of this boom of tearing down buildings and building new buildings in their place. This has been sort of a theme of San Francisco in the last 5 years or so, creating more smaller apartments for people to dwell in. But it's still huge, and this is the thing with solar panels on roofs, and why it just makes so much sense is Jay, Ed, you and the three of us could get a big pool of money together, and we could find some area out in the desert or out in some gosh awful unfarmable land, buy it really cheap, and we could put solar panels all over the place. But
we could have like a solar panel farmhouse or something.
Yeah, solar farm, right? Solar farm, our own little private power plant using the sun. But then we've got to sell that, and we've got to sell it to the big power brokers. Think whatever name shows up on your utility bill. We got to sell it to those people, and we got to sell it to those people cheap enough for them to even notice we're trying to sell electricity to them, because they're buying in such huge quantities from mass producers that we can't just go out there and ask for the wholesale value of electricity to even get their attention. We have to charge them less than what the lowest rate they're already paying somebody else, one of those bigs. We got to be there at a subvented rate, which means it's going to take us 100 years or so to become profitable. Actually, we'll never become profitable. We just won't be able to make it. The math doesn't work out. That's why these things aren't springing up all over the place. However, if you put a solar panel on your roof, that electricity, when being used, is at full retail, because that's offsetting a full retail price that you would have paid for that electricity. And when you go on vacation for 3 weeks and don't run the air conditioner, and that's dialing back your meter, you're actually getting credited at full retail. You don't have to. You're not selling it back to your XYZ utility company for below the lowest rate they'd ever paid for electricity. You're doing it at the full retail. And that's why it's really important to get it at the source. Plus, we lose, we know, about 50% of electricity from the power plant to actually flickering on a light in the house, right? About half the electricity gets lost in the transmission. When you have your solar panels right on the roof, they're pretty much 100% efficiency in terms of the amount of electricity they're delivering to the house, because it's not going through power lines, high power voltage lines that are crossing the country. It's just right there, and you don't have this loss. So it's more efficient in its production to the delivery point, and it's at full retail, which is why you can. There's a bazillion companies. I think there was one actually on that side of that article that you showed, that you screen shared, is one of these companies that will put solar panels on your roof for free. They'll basically lease your roof from you, give you a subvented rate. They might, save you 20%, 30% on your electricity bill, but still make a profit on the margin, because they have the same business policy that or same business idea that we had with our solar panels out in the middle of the desert, only they realize they get full retail when they put it on your roof, and can both cut your rate by 20, 30% or whatever it is, and make a healthy profit on the margin, because that electricity they produce is at the full retail rate. Now, there's utility companies across the country. They're constantly trying to pass or get past legislation that prevents this from happening to an extent, because they're saying, hey, you can't charge us back full retail. We have all these people with trucks, and they go out there, and then the power lines fall. We got to maintain this massive infrastructure on top of just buying and selling electricity. So this isn't fair to us. And they're right, but also I hope they don't win, because this is how you transition off of those old energy sources, is that you get more localized power in the hands of the consumers.
Oh, hey, Ed, someone in the room was saying the audio of the Hangout's kind of hard to hear or something. Not sure what they mean.
Tell them to turn up. They should have a volume button somewhere.
It's technical. This
on
is
one of their
technical,
devices,
Jay.
They should have a volume button that allows them to increase the the volume of our talking.
With Hangouts, every week it's something new. I'm getting 5 bars. I'm getting little 5 dots. So I don't know. Justin doesn't even need a mic, so.
Actually, yeah, my mic isn't even turned on. That's what's amazing. You're just hearing me yell from wherever you live. This is how loud I talk.
One thing I was thinking about, in one of the stories you might not get to, it's a portable charger, portable electric charger that you take with you. It's for charging devices. And you know what? I can see that happen. I can see people out on the roof. Not on the roof, but out on the little balconies, little solar panels, charging up everything.
So I've got some of these devices. One, I don't know where it is. I thought it might be within arm's reach, but it's not. I've got this little, sort of like the free play radio. It's got the crank on it. You can charge it. You turn it around. I've got a flashlight like this, and you can run a radio on it. I've got one of these you can plug your phone into, and you can hand crank charge your phone. I've got one of those, and I've also got a portable battery that you can, fully charge, and then it's got a couple phones charges worth of juice in there. I took it on vacation actually to New York, and then was out and about with the thing, and my phone battery was going low, and I'm like, aha, I'll just plug into my little handy dandy backup battery, and off I'll go. And then I realized, oh, I still need my regular charging cord to plug into the thing to get the electrons to go from here to there. So I totally failed, but yeah. Yeah. So what's special about this particular thing? If we get to this story, what would we be talking about?
Well, we would be talking about. Actually, I might as well do the old
as long as we're there.
Share. Might as well, since here we go. It says mobile charger, and this is once again our friends at Tree Hugger, hugging them trees. There we go. There's that little sucker. and it's something called the Chotec. The Chotec portable unit. There it is. There's a picture of it. Neat little thing. This guy gave a review. It costs $100, and you can get it on Amazon for probably $50.
That's not bad.
Let's see. It's encased. I'm gonna get the text on. Let's see. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Well, let's see. Charger encased in a rugged polyester canvas. Mesh zipper pouch. Holds the unit, which is only 10 inches by 6 inches by less than an inch. Folded up, displays 3 solar panels, not just one. Got 3.
Ed,
yes.
You had me at mesh zippered pouch.
There we go. Yeah, well, just like the kangaroos. That's what the kangaroos got. They're probably hiding their little solar chargers. 24% efficiency. Okay.
Not bad.
And $50 on Amazon. That's not too bad. You know, you do have to have sunlight and stuff.
Yeah, I know. And so I'm sort of picturing, you know, I got to make a phone call. I got to take it outside. Then you're out there on the phone, holding this thing, maybe wearing it like a hat, right? While you hope that it's charging long enough for you to continue texting or talking, or what have you. But yeah, like this is that level of technology that we're heading to. We've seen it integrated in some aspect in cars. There was a Prius model that put solar panels on there that all it really did was run a fan. It just basically operated a pretty simple fan, but the idea was you park your car out in this parking lot, and it's 100 degrees out that day, and as long as the sun is hitting that solar panel, it's running the fans and it's recirculating the air. So when you get into the car, it's the outside temperature. It's, you know, it might be 80 degrees, 90 degrees still in the car, but it won't be that 140 degrees that it would have been with the car just heating up there. But yeah, we're gonna, you know, this is how you maintain. I mean, this is basically for those campers who just can't go camping without their iPad, right? It's like, I want to go out there, feel the nature and all that, get that whole experience, but I still want to be able to play Angry Birds before I go to bed, or watch this show because there's still Wi-Fi. There's Wi-Fi in the forest now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
For at least enough cell signal to watch a video.
It's amazing. All these people in this third world countries, that's all they use, the little smartphone. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I'm going to jump into the next story since it covers our favorite subject. Poop. Wait, not poop. Waste. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to get too excited. This is actually waste management.
So waste, I think, is a horrible word. Okay? There's nothing that describes the act of pooping better than the word poop. It is the most performative word in the English language. It starts puckered, goes to a woo, this big open, and then it puckers again at the end, just like the act of pooping. So I prefer the, you know, poop management is much more, it's much more direct.
There's a link here in this story to Big Belly. And if I can just find it, there we go, Big Belly. There's your nice fancy spancy little compactor trash thing. And what is one solution in finding a smarter approach to waste collection? The largest single cost of municipal waste management is inefficient collection of waste. It's typically collected by a diesel fuel truck driving around emptying trash cans whether they're full or not.
Okay, so unless this is Greenland, this isn't actually about poop. This is actually just garbage waste.
Yeah, okay. It's garbage.
And in Greenland, they actually do come around with a truck, and you're supposed to have put a bag in the bucket, apparently. There's a bucket underneath the toilet seat, and it's supposed to have a bag. They don't actually just dump the bucket itself without the bag liner. Sorry, it's something awkward. Some awkward experience I had in Greenland.
What is this country What is this country I'll never visit in my life again? Greenland?
Yeah, it's apparently there's
white. Why do they call it Greenland? It's white.
This was reverse marketing on the part of the Vikings. They called that Greenland and Iceland, even though it had greenery, because they wanted more of the other Vikings to go there and keep Iceland for those who got in there first. Sorry, I sidetracked. So this isn't a poop story. This is actual garbage.
Garbage. And the important thing is that these particular garbage cans, they've got a little electronic device in there, and it tells the truck coming along, the garbage truck, whether or not it's actually full. So instead of wasting its time, even if there may be very little trash, the garbage truck can go where they're full, and therefore it's a much more efficient system.
Brilliant. Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's see. But of course we have the people with the tinfoil hats, civil libertarians. They're worried. They're worried about the surveillance potential of large data generating projects. They got the FBI. We know the FBI. We got all those CIA people. They're going to be looking at that trash. They're going to be able to tell how much trash you're throwing out. The Civil Liberties Australian Vice President told The Guardian, if technology could detect the type of rubbish, if someone tried to dispose of an illegal substance, it would set off alarm and message the police.
So, okay.
You went to a rally, right? You went to a rally, and it was one of those people trying to overthrow the government, and you threw it away. Well, you know what? They can look in your trash. They can say Justin. They can say Ed. Here's that terrorist because of what he threw away in his trash.
Okay, so here's what we do. We make it an opt-out program. So if you don't want one of these sensors in your garbage can, the government can immediately know that you're up to suspicious activity and can manually search each can of garbage you dispose of. Go through it meticulously. If you've torn documents, they're shredded them even. They're going to put a team of people at work to put all those papers back together to see what you were trying to hide. They're going to do full genetic analysis of the food that you threw away in order to make clones of you that they will use in proxy of you to commit crimes that they will then charge you for. Whatever the tinfoil-hatted conspiracy, libertarian, uncivil people are worried about, somebody could collect that data anyway, just by knowing what you bought and to begin with. You could probably determine how much trash somebody's generating by monitoring their credit cards. But I think it's an irrational fear. We also there was people who are afraid of. We have these smart meters now that make it so. And you would think, it's different conspiracy theorists should be either in favor or afraid of this. But it used to be, those utility companies would have to come over and somebody would have to go into sometimes your backyard and read a meter to know what to charge you for your electricity. But now they have these smart meters that just send the signal. And people were, oh, this has an electronics in it and it's going to give us all cancer or do mind control. No, it just tells them when you've used how much electricity and what to charge you. It doesn't do anything else. And it also prevents people from having to go into the backyard and deal with your dog, who you think is perfectly harmless, but that's because it's your dog and will see anything else as an intruder. So I put this in the category of shut up.
Yeah. And our friend Rox, we have Rox now in the chat area, and she's having a problem. I don't. She's been in other Hangouts and it seems to be okay. I didn't change anything, so I'm hoping. I shouldn't say I'm hoping, but I
Yeah,
think maybe the problem might be with her. So I don't know.
it could be because I'm hearing you fine. I've been hearing Jay fine, and I think you guys are hearing me fine. So it could be gremlins.
We might find out when this gets recorded that it's awful, which makes more sense than what we're saying right now. I don't know, but okay. I'm going to lead on. Was that the one I wanted to get to? Let me see. We got the charger. We got the trash cans. All right. We're going to go a little free form here. We got our friend Justin. Now, Justin and Pamela have a political hangout called Meaningless Words. I know they had a show. I don't think Pamela's had a chance to edit it yet. But in the pre-show, Justin had something he wanted to talk about with our friend Saudi Arabia.
So yeah, no, just this is going to be the next Meaningless Words episode. It's not the one that we already did. It's going to be the next one. But part of it is that Saudi Arabia has deemed the hosts of that show, maybe this show, maybe those listening, as terrorists. We are apparently terrorists. This is a Royal Decree 44, started in 2014. And it started for a national security reason in Saudi Arabia. They said, hey, look, there's a lot of people leaving to go fight in Syria and coming back, and we're afraid that they may take militant actions against the government here or start using military tactics against the, I don't know if you call it, it's not government if it's a monarchy, is it? What do you call it? The royal family's established rule or whatever it is. They're taking action against the monarchy after having been trained militarily there. So Royal Decree 44 said anybody found going off and fighting for a foreign country and coming back could be charged with up from 3 to 20 years in prison. And then they started adding little bits of things to that. They added not just joining foreign fighters, but being a member of the Muslim Brotherhood could get you that 3 to 20 years. And then they added atheists. And by atheists, they then went on further to explain that atheism, speaking about atheism, even if you're not an atheist yourself, but speaking about atheism in public, which means any place anybody can overhear you, is an act of terrorism. And that such individuals will be seen as terrorists in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So that's a pretty harsh treatment, I think. This is somebody who the United States considers an ally in the war on terrorism. That's at least how it's reported. They're definitely a financial partner and a political ally in the Middle East. And yet, a percentage of the United States population, which I would beckon, or I would wager is probably in the 30% of the U.S. population is atheist, whether they've actually admit it or come to that conclusion. It could actually be much higher. If everybody in the United States who claimed a religion actually went to church, they would need to build several thousand more mega churches across the country, because there's more open pews out there than there are. There's a lot more people claiming a religion than there are open pews. Now it's the other way around. So then this is sort of interesting because they're calling us terrorists. Now there is an attempt by families who lost loved ones in 9/11 to sue the Saudi government because apparently members of the Saudi Arabian government helped finance Al-Qaeda attacks in 9/11. Now, this isn't a 9/11 conspiracy show. We're not going to tell you that there was, the Bush family was involved and that there weren't actually hijackers. It was robot planes, or that the Trade Center never actually existed and it was just all done in studio. Whatever those things are, that's none of this. But there's apparently 28 pages of the 9/11 report that are classified, that it has been leaked, indicate the hand of government officials in Saudi Arabia financing it. Not just in Saudi Arabia, but there were government officials of Saudi Arabia here in the United States that added some funding to it. Now, they want to sue that government, and they've been blocked from suing. They've been told, no, we can't have U.S. citizens suing foreign governments because this is a national affairs thing, and it's not how this system works. You can't just be suing. And then we'd be getting sued by countries for things we did. So this isn't an international court thing. We can't just have U.S. citizens suing foreign countries. But because one of the arguments that these families are making is that because the tax took place in the United States, and that I guess some of the Saudi Arabian officials indicated and facilitating funding were also here in the United States, this isn't an international event in that case. This is something that took place on U.S. soil, and therefore that should give them the right to sue. And so it's been in the news. Saudi Arabia is already talking about withdrawing or selling off $750 billion in U.S. assets that are here in the United States, treasury bonds, that sort of thing, which would destabilize it's a pretty big threat. It would destabilize the U.S. economy a bit. Also, their own economy is tied to the U.S. dollar, so it would be sort of a suicide money bombing. And here's the other interesting thing. Supreme Court just the other day, 6-2, went ahead with families of the Beirut bombing in 1983, 81, 82, 83. I can't remember exactly when it was, but gave them the go-ahead for their lawsuit against Iran and Iran's funding of the bombing in Beirut, and gave them the right, or gave them the authorization for this lawsuit to go ahead, which has already been approved at $2 billion of frozen Iranian assets that are in the United States. So it seems as though the Supreme Court has just created a precedent for an attack that happened overseas for families of the deceased to sue a foreign government, albeit Iran, but they seem still hesitant to allow this to go forward for an attack that happened on U.S. soil, where there was direct government, not through third party, well, through third party if it's Al-Qaeda, but there where we can really connect the dots on the funding that happened on U.S. soil, and are hesitant to allow, are attempting to veto maybe even, that lawsuit from going forward. And again, to where we started this is a country that engaged in terrorism apparently on U.S. soil that considers a huge portion of U.S. citizens to be themselves terrorists.
I got a question. And this can have a very direct impact on Saudi Arabia if they're declaring, for instance, a certain group of many Muslims as being terrorists. Now, every Muslim in the world is supposed to visit a holy shrine in Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to guess this provides a large part of whatever tourist dollars or anything they get. Is every Muslim in the world, I forget what they call it, begins with an H. I can't think of the Hajj. Yeah, the Hajj. So now they got a little problem. They got all the maybe 50% of the Muslims in the world might be, by their definition, terrorists.
Sure.
And they don't want to let them into Saudi Arabia? Or they're going to let them in and then they're going to arrest them?
So part of it, I got to pause you for a second. Because if you're a Muslim, you're not an atheist, therefore not falling under the terror. Well, although if you even talk about atheism, you could still be
Muslim.
Well, that's
Muslim
a political
brotherhood.
But no, they're not. You can't be a Muslim and an atheist at the same time. It's like being a Christian atheist. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but hasn't this terrorist law, or whatever it is, you said it applied to the Muslim Brotherhood?
But yeah,
Saudi Arabia viewing the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists.
Yeah, it's a political party. But they also they go on to sort of say, well, it's almost like we don't care what your political beliefs actually are. We're not going to, drill down, but we don't want anybody speaking publicly in favor or just bringing it up at all. You could actually be a Muslim talking about atheism and still fall under the terrorism segment of this law, because what they're looking for is to reduce any sort of social uprising, and this dates back like 80, 90 years, or maybe it's a couple hundred years. But it's a really long pact that the royal family of Saudi Arabia has had with the people within the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is we're going to live out a very materialistic, wealth-oriented, elite lifestyle. In return, we're going to allow you to be funded to the point where you don't actually have to go and have a job. You can pray all day if that's what you want to do. As long as you don't upset our apple cart, we'll keep funding you with food and mosques, and you can just do your thing. And what is sort of grown in that relationship, in that system, is a more and more. Some would call it. Somebody you could call it. Is it radical Islam? Is it fundamentalist Islam? I call it literal. I think it's a literal interpretation of. So I call it literal Islam. I mean, whenever you take anything literally, it's always bad. This is why Socrates never wrote down any of his speeches. He didn't want to be taken literally. He wanted to have a chance to change his point of view mid-sentence. Because literal interpretations of anything are lethal. They're worse than hard drugs.
Well, one aspect of this is if we're talking lawsuits, okay, it would be better if you have a terrorist if we just sue. Instead of having wars, you just sue countries. Now, if we do that, let's say what country has produced a large number of terrorists?
Stop right there. Let's let's change the subject, because obviously if we're going to go back throughout all of history and see how many funding of this or financing of that or whose arms were used, who manufactured what bomb, it would just be endless. We could just be talking forever and we would never get to a point where we weren't innocent. So,
how much would the Twin Towers, how much could we sue to recover the cost of the Twin Towers, which, as I recall, wasn't that a plot by somebody named Osama bin Laden?
$1 trillion.
Saudi?
Yeah. So currently the threat from Saudi Arabia, if the lawsuit against them is allowed to go forward, their threat that they've countered with is that they would sell off $750 billion in U.S. assets. So the Beirut bombing ruling was for $2 billion, and now they're just waiting the authorization of a judge to release funds, Iranian funds that are being held in some sort of escrow account of some sort, for that to be paid out to the 1,000 families in the lawsuit. Apparently, the Saudi Arabia is afraid that $750 billion sounds like their take on it thus far. That's what they've threatened to sell off. So maybe that's the price tag. $750 billion.
We shouldn't keep complaining about Saudi Arabia, because thanks to them, fracking is now unprofitable. They've lowered the price of gas, natural gas, so low that it's unprofitable to do fracking. Okay, that's good for the environment.
Yeah, I don't know. The story of coal tells me different. The story of coal is one where the price of coal had a massive drop because the railroads found a more efficient engine. So they used like a magnitude less coal all of a sudden. All the new coal burning trains that went back and forth in the United States and in Europe. And what happened is the price of coal, which was kind of at a premium because all the big railroad barons were buying it up to run their engines, that price fell by a magnitude because magnitude less was being used, which allowed Ma, Pa, whatever to buy more coal to run the heater in the house a few more hours, to keep the furnace burning at the steel plant a little bit longer for a little bit cheaper. And all of a sudden the demand Merkel increased because now everybody was using it and it was spurning the economy on, and that also increased the energy consumption. So we're more likely than not to see an increase in productivity from anything that relies on the price of oil to be low, which could in turn be very productive for the economy, but then also lead to higher energy demands, which is why this is a perfect time for the solutions like going on in San Francisco that we mentioned at the beginning of the show, just to find a way to change the source of that energy so that increase in energy consumption can come from another source.
Isn't there, I don't remember, but isn't there an issue with the terminal that, I don't know if it's Oakland, maybe, a terminal being built, or somewhere in California, maybe Oakland, for transporting, I don't know if it's coal or fuel, overseas, to Asia perhaps?
I have not heard about this.
Okay. Oh well. Okay. I'm going to jump into some good news health stories, and we'll get back into the politics a little bit later. But
okay, I'm gonna drop out for a moment. I'll be okay. Back. The health news always scares me. So I'm gonna jump out for a second. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Now the first one, let's see, make sure. Here we go. Deals with something that really is a big issue for people in my age bracket, which is prostate cancer. And these people at Southwest Medical Center, the University Southwest Medical Center, have come up with what they say is a treatment that has a 98.6% cure rate. I want to screen share it once again so you don't have to look at my bald head. All right. This was a 5-year study showed that Stereotactic, probably mispronouncing that, Stereotactic, Stereotactic body radiation therapy to treat prostate cancer offers a higher cure rate than more traditional approaches. This particular study, 5 years, for this particular treatment, which is a non-invasive form of radiation treatment that involves high-dose radiation beams entering the body through various angles and intersecting at the desired target. State-of-the-art technology. A high cure rate is striking when compared to the reported 5-year cure rates from other approaches like surgery and conventional radiation. They range between 80 and 90% with side effects. What we now have is a more potent and effective form of non-invasive treatment for prostate cancer. Conventional treatments, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, blah, blah, blah. External beam radiation involves 42 to 45 treatments administered over 2 or more months, 5 days a week. They're talking about, let's see, the current form of radiation is 44 treatments over 9 weeks. In contrast, this new treatment, which will allow the delivery of highly focused radiation, only 5 treatments. 44 treatments versus 5 treatments. They served as the lead site for this multi-institutional clinical trial. First-time prostate cancer patients diagnosed with stage 1 or stage 2 cancer. A total of 91 patients were treated prospectively and followed for 5 years. Only 1 patient experienced a recurring of his cancer. Let's see, a shorter time interval. The researchers found side effects were not necessarily different compared to other forms of treatment. In the short term, this treatment could include, let's see, it looks like caveats here. The difference between being treated 5 times versus 44 times is enormous. Okay. I felt he was back to normal in 10 days after finishing treatments. Researchers found a small risk of long-term urinary and rectal complications, which also compared favorably to conventional treatments. Erectile dysfunction, we ain't going to go into that. To reduce the side effects associated with this, current clinical trials are using a unique and biodegradable rectal spacer gel to protect the rectum. Other clinical trials to be conducted. Our hope is to have a high potency of this treatment with significantly improved treatment of these patients. And I will stop there. So you're talking about this new treatment, 44 treatments as opposed, 5 treatments as opposed to 44. It's an invasive, it's a less invasive treatment because of the kind of X-ray technology that they're using. And I mean,
Ed, I came back too soon. I came back to.
I said some bad words there. I'm sorry.
I came back to anal spacer gel, and this is why I tried to avoid health studies. Yes, I'm one of those idiots who's squeamish about talking to his doctor about anything. I go into the doctor, I could be sick as hell, I could have rashes, hives, I could be running a fever. Doctor's like, so how you been? I'm great. I'm fine. I don't know what it is. I'm afraid of admitting to my doctor that anything could ever possibly be wrong with me.
Yeah, I completely understand it. Quickly go into, this shouldn't upset you at all. This is talking about insulin.
All right.
It's talking about diabetes. And this is a really interesting treatment. Insulin transplantation restores blood sugar awareness and control in type 1 diabetes. Okay, do the old screen share. There we go. And new clinical trial results show that transplantation of pancreatic islets, cell clusters that contain insulin-producing cells, prevents severe, potentially life-threatening drops in blood sugar in people with type 1 diabetes.
Interesting.
The treatment was effective for people who experienced episodes of severe hypoglycemia, low blood sugar levels that can cause seizures. Let's see, phase 3. This is a phase 3 trial. Investigators designed the study in consultation with the FDA, and the results appeared in Diabetes Care. Findings suggest that people who continue to have life-threatening severe hypoglycemia despite optimal medical management, this new islet transplantation offers a potential life-saving treatment. I want to get to when they start talking about, let's see, with experiments, with risks that must be weighed carefully. The promise is undeniable and encouraging. Let's see, I want to get to the current study enrolled 48 people with persistent impaired awareness of hypoglycemia and experienced severe hypoglycemic events despite expert care. Let's see. Investigators at 8 sites use standardized manufacturing protocols.
So I guess it's showing here side effects, risks including infections, lowered kidney functions, result of people taking immune-suppressing drugs that were needed to prevent the rejection of the donor isolates. So kind of a small sample size, but you know, it's sort of at first is sort of reminding me of like gut bacteria transplantations, where you can have people who sort of lose weight or lose gastrointestinal problems by having a healthy donor bacterial gut flora transplanted in. It sort of makes sense if the body isn't producing, your own body isn't producing these insulin-creating isolates, that you could have them just donated, and then it would sort of self-regulate. But of course, anytime you take cell clusters from one body to another, there is that whole, the immune system is going to see this potentially as an other. What they might need to do, and I don't know how in depth they looked at the donors. I would assume there was a certain level of vetting that goes on there, but finding a better, maybe it's a matter of finding better genetic matches of those cell transplants, because it might not just be, you might need it to be from direct family members, a sibling, somebody who doesn't have a certain type of Y chromosome that is prone to rejection. This might be something that you see the rejection might show up more in women than men, and what does that mean? So, seeing that the proof of concept is there is completely positive. You can actually work a lot. You can do a lot more work on what's causing the rejections and prevent that, so that you might not even need the immunosuppressant drugs, which might then by itself remove a lot of the negative reactions.
Yeah, you're starting with a group of people who are having a problem. They have type 1 diabetes, and they're having problems going into seizures and things. So that's the population you're talking about, people with a severe problem.
Yeah.
And this is one potential way for them to reduce the number of seizures. That it's not a cure by any stretch of the imagination. It's only focused on dealing with people who have a severe hypoglycemic problem to begin with. I would imagine, though, it's one more step, like you say. You learn this particular process. If you can perfect it, it's got to help you elsewhere.
Right.
Good news story. This is lower mortality rates for poor children in the U.S. Now, the thing is, you're talking about children. And this is the University of Zurich. So the rates, life expectancies, let's see, life expectancies distributed unequally across social classes, blah, blah, blah. Income inequity was leading to income inequity in health and life expectation. Between 1990 and 2010, the difference in survival chances of children and young adults from different areas in the U.S., however, decreased. Now, this is child mortality. Between 1990 and 2010, infant mortality rates decreased in all U.S. regions. The most pronounced improvement taking place in the poorest counties. 1990, 1 out of every 1,000 newborn males in the poorest regions died, 18.3% died before reaching their third birthday, and this figure has now dropped to 9.8. So we're talking about a significant reduction.
Wait a second. Hang on. Am I hearing this right? In the poorest parts of counties in the United States, we had nearly 1 out of 5 children not making it to age 3?
Yeah. 18.3% died before reaching their third birthday.
That's insanely high. I had no idea the numbers could even be. That sounds like 1800s British ghettos or something. Like, this doesn't sound like this could be 1980 to 1990 America.
Yeah.
Wow.
It would be interesting to look at different states, but this is poorest across the United States. It just says 1 out of every 1,000 births. Yeah, it looks like a.
Oh, wait, 1 out of what?
No, that's it's it. They're looking at the 1 out of 18. They're out of every one. I mispronounced.
Okay.
Misspoke. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, I'm glad we're clarifying because that number sounded like it was almost like during the Black Plague.
Well, it is an incredibly terrible number.
But what is
In
the number? I still
1990,
need.
it's
I
not
still
on
need
the
the number.
9.8%. So it's been cut in half, but you're
9.8%.
still talking about 9.8%.
Is it 9.8% or 9.8 out of every 10,000? Wait, what is the? Hang
It's
on.
9.8% of every 1,000 children born in the poorest counties of the United States as of 2010.
So, hang on. I'm having an aneurysm. 9.8 out of 1,000, which is
Yes.
like 0.98%.
I get you.
Or I mean, 9.8% of 1,000 would then be like 98 people out of 1,000, which is a completely different number. And that's why this is why
I gave you an aneurysm there. I'm sorry. It was 18.3 out of 1,000.
Okay. So this is
There we
good. That's
go.
not a percentage because this is very important. Still a dramatic improvement, and I love the
Yes.
improvement. But I mean, this is like when the doctors were delivering children and the doctors were at a volunteer hospital where part of the time they cut up cadavers and then they would go deliver children, and they had these super high mortality rates because of the infections that they were transplanting before Semmelweis convinced people to wash their hands, and also midwives didn't have nearly that same. This is a long time ago. Okay.
See, now, this is why you got to have a younger brain.
It's okay. It's a magnitude difference, but still also dramatic improvement. So that does indicate things like Planned Parenthood, things like free clinics, things like education, healthcare for children programs. These government programs that have been put forward to address these issues are working, and that's very important. And I've always been a big fan of government safety net, and I'm always very opposed to any argument in favor of relying on charities. Whenever somebody says, well, we need just to have more charitable giving. Problem with those sorts of programs is they're sporadic. They require volunteers and volunteer money. If the economy goes up or down, those amounts given change. The services offered change. And so there's no reliability or dependability on receiving benefits from charities in that case. Also, you're going to find that something as simple as a loaves and fishes sort of charity that feeds the poor is going to be also have that flux of based on donations and based on the economy and how many donations they're getting, but it's also going to be in a location typically where it's best able to serve the most amount of poor people, which means that if you're reliant on that charity for the donations for which you can make ends meet from month to month, you also can't leave that area that's already a very poor area, which is why they put that loaves and fishes or that homeless shelter or whatever it is there. You find a resource that you have to stay in an impoverished area in order to maintain yourself. When you turn it into government safety net, you can pick up and take that elsewhere. You can take your family out of that area where, because of whatever economy it is, we could point to Detroit or Flint, Michigan, as an example. We could point to the state of Kansas in general and say that I want to take my family someplace more prosperous where we have more opportunities. And if you have a government safety net that's going to allow for health care aid, for unemployment or food stamps or welfare or whatever it is, if you can pick that up and move it to a region within a state, even within a county, just change cities, maybe change the part of town you're in, you have a much better chance of overcoming poverty with that sort of government backing than you do relying on any sort of charitable organization that has made you dependent on donations and on a particular location where those donations will become accessible. So that was more ranty and rambly than it probably needed to be.
For the clarification, there's an interesting story, and it deals with lab mice. And let me screen share it. Okay, our friend the lab mice. And when you, in the lab, you have lab mice sharing the same space with pet shop mice, it actually gives the mice a more human-like immune system.
So there's we sort of talked about this on TWIS. What was it? Yesterday. Mm-hmm. Not this particular story that you brought up, but just sort of the general. And there's sort of two lines of thought that came out of this, right? One is if you treat your lab mice better. And one, it was just giving them more entertainment. I brought up an example of making food easier to access if they've been through like a surgery or a trauma or something, some part of the experiment that created trauma, making it sort of just nurturing them, hand feeding them almost, right? Or in this case, maybe allowing these sterile environment mice to interact with the bacteria of sort of free-range pet store mice, allowing that to bolster their immune system. Yes, I think it makes sense. You can have better outcomes with the better socialized, better entertained, better fed, better immune system bolstered mice. You can have better outcomes. However, part of the problem of that is the other line of thought is since all studies that are done are most vast majority, because there's no majority that isn't vast, otherwise it wouldn't be a majority, so you could just leave the word vast out every time, that the majority of mice studies are being done on the lab mice that don't have those. So you could run two parallel studies, one with strictly lab mice, and one with mice that have these enhanced environments. And your enhanced mouse environment study has got a much better result. Okay, so that's the parallel study. And you can say, yes, enhanced environment helps the mouse. But then you have two different studies, one using drug A, one using drug B. And one's using strictly lab mice, and one's using enhanced environment mice. An enhanced environment mice study comes out a little bit better. So obviously that's the better drug to use, right? Well, no. We have now an imbalance in the mice that we're using. So the first drug that actually performed worse in this study, but that was done on strictly lab mice with no enhancements, actually outperformed, because if you'd done the other study with those same lab mice, it would have underperformed the first drug. So this is that it's sort of all or nothing. You have to have a standardization on these treatments, and that's what becomes very difficult. So in some respects, from a purely scientific point of view of trying to get similar outcomes based on similar mice being used in these studies, you almost want to use the minimum standard of care, which sounds horrible, but you almost want that because that's maintainable across the spectrum of the studies. And if you have enhanced environment mice in the mix, those studies almost have to be thrown out unless they're only being compared to the same laboratories' enhanced mouse environments. Because if you're trying your own, if you're in-house experimenting with two different versions of your own drug on two sets of enhanced environment mice, you can compare them perhaps properly, but they won't be relevant when comparing them then to any strictly lab-raised and standard care mice in any other studies. You lose your ability to compare at that point. So it's a tough question, and the real important aspect of it is, regardless of which direction we decide to go going forward, it has to be standardized, because if anything, this proves that some studies might have results that are skewed by the treatment of their mice. And therefore we have to look at that, which we don't necessarily get in the data. We don't get that somebody came through and cleaned the cage every day. We don't know if they had a little fun wheel to run on or not. We don't know if they got socialized with mice that might have had a more robust immune system. So it calls then into question a lot of studies, and almost requires that as a data set attached to every study done on mice to know the quality of life or care or environment enhancements that those mice had access to.
Well, think of the number of mice, number of treatments that work perfectly well in mice. And then you start going to the clinical trials, don't work on people. I would say the vast majority.
It doesn't have to be a vast. You could just say majority.
Okay.
We could assume
majority.
the vast. And I don't know if that's true. Is that really true? Is it a majority? I don't know that it's
my perception. I'm guessing it's a majority. I mean, when we look at all these mouse studies we've read all the years,
right?
How many of them actually ever work out in clinical trials?
So part of what you're describing, though, is the slowness of the process through the FDA, which is slow for a reason. But before they go into a clinical trial where they're going to give a drug to a human and see what happens, they want multiple tests. They want it can be effective in this mouse trial, and we want like 10 more of them, and we want to look for different things. And then there's also different, like typically when they, for whatever reason, when they do, I think it's whenever they're doing studies on kidney, how the kidney will react, they use guinea pigs because they're a better model than the mouse is for the human system. I don't know why. Maybe it's respiratory system as well. Maybe there's the mice are good for some, but not for all. And so what they look for isn't just, they don't just go from a successful animal trial to a human trial and then have a failure and then back off. They have to really do lots of examples of it. So it's just a slow system, and it's slow for a reason. There's a real strict ethic within the FDA to attempt to put out products or allow products through that do no harm. And we're at a cutting edge of creating treatments and drugs and narrowing down these treatments that we have an accelerated number of studies, but the process is still so slow. And then part of these two are, we're going to knock out certain genes. So we're going to actually be looking at only one aspect of how this drug will affect humans, because we've knocked out certain genes. And so we're only going to look for specific reactions. So then we have to go back and do these studies over again without the knocked out gene and see how that affects the overall system within the mice. So there's layers to this. We're going to be talking to the Jackson Labs on This Week in Science next week. And I'm excited about that, because this is a great line of questioning we're bringing up here, Ed, which I think is going to be something we definitely want to bring up and see how they address that, or see what standards may already be in place.
Yeah, they've had tremendous success. Even though I don't know what the percentages are, but certainly they've had tremendous successes. And I don't know, again, medications that originated from mouse studies and other animal studies, and you look at the number of people that have been helped, it's just amazing. Yeah. And we're perfecting. That's what this talks about. We're kind of perfecting the trial and error process as best we can.
Which is why my favorite picture from the Blair's Animal Corner calendar is the research mouse. This is the only one I had to have. I had to have the physical copy of, because this, to me, this mouse right here, to me is If aliens came to planet Earth and wanted to know who had been involved in more research, what life form had done more scientific research than any other on this planet, it would be the research mouse.
Yeah. The mice have saved many, 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 many lives.
Yeah. A vast majority of lives, you may say.
Yeah. Possibly.
Or perhaps just
what's between? Is there something between vast and majority?
I think there's something called a simple majority.
Simple majority?
Yeah.
That's me. I'm part of the simple majority.
There's a simple majority. Then there's a modest majority.
Okay.
There is a vast majority, and then there's an excessive majority. An excessive majority of anything is probably a bad thing. That sounds like you got more than should have actually fit into a majority. It's like
that's called a funding majority.
I think it's called 12 men on the field. Is what that's the excessive majority.
Briefly want to talk about this particular study, and what it comes down to is the symbiotic relationships that occur every ecosystem. Here we're talking about a forest. And what it comes down to is the symbiotic relationship between trees and a particular type of fungi and trees and other trees sharing resources. Mm-hmm. And the interrelationship between the trees and the fungus, what happens is the trees provide, now the fungus provides fertilizer, etc. In effect,
it creates nitrogen.
Nitrogen, yes. And 80%, the plant's lesser-known partners, the mycorrhizal fungi, live in the soil and provide the trees with up to 80% of their nitrogen and phosphorus needs. Mm-hmm. And in exchange, the trees supply the fungi's carbon requirements. Mm-hmm. Now, they also found that tree seedlings exchange carbon through this underground fungal network, and they provide the, let's see, where is it, 40%. 40% of the carbon that the seedlings receive come from parent, I don't know if it's parent, from trees. So you've got trees to fungi to seedlings, and it's an entire symbiotic relationship. Mm-hmm. And one of the points to me is how much is going on out there we don't know about.
Yeah,
there's
also a couple interesting things with the particular fungi that you're talking about, because it also it accelerates the growth specifically of certain plants. Okay, so there's, because of the symbiotic relationship, there's plants that have this symbiosis, and there's others that don't quite have the symbiosis. But it's still producing a great deal of nitrogen. So when this plant, it gets this surge and it grows quickly, it also gets quicker to canopy, which sort of reduces its own members of seedlings, because those are those that would be closest to it and around it, and it gets a canopy. However, they've created an excess of nitrogen, which the other plants in the region, which don't have a symbiotic relationship, can actually utilize that nitrogen themselves to grow up. So it's this sort of, it's both a symbiotic relationship for the plant, but it's in a weird way self-limiting on its ability to spread, because it allows it to grow really quickly, which creates the localized canopy, which prevents its own offspring from the seedlings, however you want to say it, from really taking over that territory, and at the same time allowing neighboring plants to receive nitrogen, which allows them to grow up and quicker than they normally would, and also create canopy. So it's a sort of interesting interplay. Plant ecology is just a fascinating thing.
Oh, forest. I mean, you walk into a forest, poor human, and we think, okay, maybe there's a little tree rustling or something, but there's tons of interactions happening, all kinds of communications happening. It's a very dynamic environment, and us humans are just walking along.
Well, some of us are. I mean, I've walked through the forest with somebody who's an arborist or what do you call it, aviary bird watcher, and all of a sudden you see that forest through completely different eyes. All of a sudden they're pointing out that, hey, this is a rare sighting of this bird over here that you didn't even notice was there, right? And they're categorizing it, and they're explaining how this bird is different from that, and you don't notice unless you're having it pointed out to you, which is why one of the things that we also talked about last week on This Week in Science is once you actually go out there to directly look for something specific, like looking for the number of lizards and snakes in a kilometer of desert, or count the number of birds in a square kilometer or square mile of forest, then you start to really notice the forest for the trees. Well, I don't know, maybe I got off thing, but yeah, until that's what you're specifically looking for, you're right. You might not notice it. You might just hear some background tweets and follow this beaten path through the woods. But yeah, taking the path less trodden is sometimes a lofty goal, sometimes not. All right, Ed, I got to leave you here. I got to go.
Okay.
But good hanging out with you. Nice talking to you, Jay. I don't know if he's still there. Maybe he is.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
All right, Jay. Ed, I'm heading out. But good night to both of you. Thanks for hanging out.
Good night.
Enjoy teaching, helping your children learn in school.
So no, it's okay. So apparently I've oversold what I actually do at the preschool. My strengths in preschool is I'm good at blowing bubbles. I'm very good at helping kids wash hands, and I just make sure nobody jumps off anything real high or takes the tricycle down the stairs. I mean, it's just I'm basically like a yard duty or something. I don't know, recess supervisor.
Do you test drive these tricycles first to make sure they're safe?
So actually, I did, sort of. So I had this incident, this dilemma, which is there's a bunch of kids and they all jumped into the cart, and I was pulling this wagon. I was pulling a wagon. I had, I think, 2 kids in it, and then a third kid who wanted to get in. So we stopped. We let the third kid in, and then as we were starting to go around, like 3 other kids ran up and all wanted to get in. I realized I had more kids who wanted to be in the wagon than could be in the wagon. So I came up with this brilliant idea. Hey, I got an idea. I'll get in the wagon, and you guys can pull me. All right? This seemed like pretty clever, and they all got behind the idea, and there was some pushing and some pulling, and then I realized there's a problem. Once we get going, none of them can stop us from going. I'm gonna run over the kids who are pulling, because they're, one of the things when you're pulling kids in the car is you can also stop the wagon, right? You could just like put a little, but no, I realized they're gonna be getting run over, so I had to quickly throw my foot out and drag it, and by dragging it, I pulled the wagon I was being pulled in off of the concrete into the wood chips and flipped. So it's mostly. Actually, I think part of it is the kids looking after me. They're making sure I don't do anything too foolish. Because they all made sure I was okay. They're like, you okay? I'm like, yeah. They're like, shake it off. Shake it off. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm good. But, yeah. So it's it's really more me being at circle time and learning from the kids than anything else. But good night, guys. See you next week.
Okay, I'll see you next week. Bye. And the actual studies themselves I've covered over quickly. They're going to be in the show notes. You want to read them all in detail? Going to be in the show notes. Let's see. Almost kind of in the after show of TWIS, sort of at this point. Now that Justin is gone, anything you want to talk about? I've asked that question in the chat area. Last week, we got into a big discussion of science fiction movies as an example. Anything that particularly caught your eye this week, Jay? Blue Jay. Okay. I will soldier on with a couple of stories, a few more stories. Not sure how much longer we'll go, but this is an interesting one because we were talking about the symbiotic relationship between the trees and the fungi and seedlings, etc. Now we're talking, what I want to talk about is, it actually is kind of a symbiotic relationship between AI in the cyber industry. Wait a second, Jay. What do we got here? Jay has posted, talking about will not be investigating offshore trust and tax affairs by parliamentary watchdog David Cameron. All right, he is, okay, let's see, I gotta get the story. We're talking English Prime Minister. And we're talking about the old Panama Papers data leak. He was forced into a position. He had to release a 6-year summary of his tax affairs after it turned out he had made $19,000 in profits from selling offshore trusts set up by his father. Disclosure, transparency. We have a Facebook group. I called it Like Politics, and I posted a story in there about how in the United States you have to release, I don't know if it's a regulation, but politicians releasing their tax forms, where they made money, at least in the last year. So you get that full disclosure. Let's see, strict rules in the House for segregation of shareholdings. He followed the law, the then existing laws. I accept all the criticism for not responding more quickly to this issue. But as I said, he was angry at the way his father's memory was being traduced or something. I'm a hardworking guy and a wonderful dad. Big whoop. Questions over a $200,000 gift from his mother, followed $300,000 inheritance he received after the death of his father. And one point to me is, I don't care how rich a candidate is or an elected official is. I don't care. I don't care how much money they made. They inherited money from their father's estate, mother's estate. I don't care. What they need to disclose and what should be disclosed is what they're receiving now, which might create a potential conflict of interest. I know that in the past, what people will do when they're going to go into the political arena, they create these blind trusts, and they say they have nothing to do with it. Yeah, maybe that's good enough. But we need full disclosure in terms of any sources of revenue at the point in time where you have been elected. I don't care what happened previous to that. But at the point in time, and you really should do it when you're running for office so that voters can know what your interests are, what your ties to any special interest group. And the big thing too is the money you get from these PACs, these political action committees. I don't think we should receive anything, personally. But it's transparency. At least you should have full disclosure. I think in the United States, if you're receiving money from a political action committee, that must be disclosed. You do get full disclosure there. But obviously, if you're in office, you should be disclosing not what happened in the past, don't care about what happened in the past, but you should disclose if you have any kind of a financial interest in any degree from corporations. In the United States, for instance, you have this almost incestuous relationship between officers at the Pentagon and corporations that are building the different fighter planes, etc. You see so many of these generals, when they retire, what do? They go and work for one of these companies. There should be some kind of a restriction. I don't think there's any. There might be some that say a general, you cannot take a job after you retire. You cannot work in the defense industry, period. Prohibition. So that's the type of thing, thank you, Jay, for posting that, where you really need full disclosure. All right, excuse me for a second, I dropped my paper. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about this news article talking about how the cyber security's use of technology and perhaps being too reliant on what are called artificially intelligent systems. They're not artificially intelligent. They're number crunching machines. The industry standard is unsupervised machine learning. That is, you're relying on strictly these machines that have been programmed to look through vast amounts of data, number crunching, what they're very good at. MIT, the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT, has developed a new program they called AI2. Draws on machines and humans. It's two components to the system, if you want to call it that. The machine and the human. There's a recognition that the volume of data that has to be analyzed is going up exponentially. But the human resources that are both trained and available to do this are not going up at the same rate. So that leaves an analytical gap. The problem, every day the data changes, you can see something new, and the behaviors may change, and the the ultimate outliers become very subjective. What they want to do is they want to create through this new system a feedback loop that creates a new partially supervised system. What happens with AI2, it flags anomalies in the data like any other unsupervised system, but then reports a small sample of its findings to the analyst. And the analysts look for false positives, data that has incorrectly been flagged as a threat. The AI does the laborious work of searching through millions of data. The humans confirm and refine their findings. And what they say is the MIT program now has an 85% detection rate and as low as a 5% false positive, where with the unsupervised learning alone, you can wind up with a 20 to 25% false positive rate. So what you need, if you want to get the best results, you don't just rely at this point on unsupervised cyber technology, the AI intelligence, the unsupervised AI intelligence. You got to put a human being in there at some point. Because the human can do a better job of analysis, as proven at least by this one type of program, the A1 program, where you've reduced the false positive rate from maybe 20 to 25% down to 5%. All right, let's see. Anything happening in the chat area? Nothing there. Okay, we have Jay mentioned how in our $20, the new $20, we're going to be showing Harriet Tubman. And I think, come on. Maybe I can find a little bit more details about this so I can talk, so I'm not just talking out of my butt. Let's see. Harriet Tubman on $20 bill. And she'll be on the new $20 bill. Okay, anti-slavery activists replacing Justin Jackson. Justin Jackson. Andrew Jackson. We want Justin Jackson on the $20 bill. Absolutely. Treasury Secretary announced the most sweeping historical symbolic makeover in American currency history. And Harriet Tubman is now going to be on the new $20 bill. And they want to add women and civil rights leaders on the $10 and $20 notes. Okay. We got Susan B. Anthony, who is on one of the coins, I think. Who else we got? We got Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Clay Stanton. Okay, so recognition, well-deserved recognition for anti-slavery activists from our past. Good idea. Let's see. I had some political stuff I was gonna get to. I guess I can cover it myself a little bit. And maybe if people want to chime in the chat area, they can. This is an article, a very long newspaper article, talking about Vancouver, British Columbia's way of dealing with heroin addicts. Very different than what we see, for the most part, in the United States. I'll include the article in our show notes. I'll have to read first couple of paragraphs. This is David Napo, and he started using heroin over 4 decades ago, when he was first 11 years old. And he's now one of 110 chronic addicts, and they receive a prescription drug. And the prescription drug is one of the active ingredients in heroin. And he receives injections 3 times a day at a heroin maintenance program. And it's been so successful at keeping addicts out of jail and away from emergency rooms that they want to expand it across Canada. Right now, this is the only medical facility in North America permitted to prescribe the narcotic. When at the same time, you've got this epidemic, raging epidemic, as it says here. You have needle exchange programs, but programs like crosstowns, where addicts receive replacement drugs like methadone, have been available for many years. There's been some objectives to it. In the United States, overdoses lately have led to 125 deaths per day. Some Republican officials, though I don't want to pick on the Republicans, because Democratic officials also object to rehabilitation professionals and police officers who are objecting to trying to have the country's first proposed injection facility in Ithaca, New York. Let's see. Study in British Columbia found that HIV and AIDS found that people who use safe injection sites were 30% more likely to enter detox programs, 70% less likely to share needles. It comes down to what's the best treatment for dealing with drug addiction. And you can't get people to stop doing it. Same thing back in the 20s. Alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs we have in terms of people getting violent when they drink, abusing their spouses, etc. So it destroys lives, it destroys families. And in the 20s, they tried to make it illegal. Absolutely didn't work. People are going to do anything they can to get the alcohol. The only thing it did was create profits for gangs. Same exact thing with heroin. Same exact thing with the absolute failure of this war on drugs. And what you have to look at, what you have to try to do is find what programs will work the best at turning addicts, making addicts more productive citizens. More resources spent on that than simply trying to stop people from taking heroin, because they're not going to stop. You should start certainly with, like, if someone on a heroin maintenance program, somebody who's got enough money so they can pay for heroin. There's obviously many entertainers who do that, and they're still able to be productive citizens. You want to certainly counsel children, young people in schools, don't use drugs. But you can't prevent people from using drugs. So you need to instead focus your resources on treating the addict so that they don't have to go to their corner drug dealer. They can get it. I think I'm completely in favor of these kinds of programs where they can get the drug they need, as long as you're not talking about something like meth, something that's going to make you become violent, but a drug that's not going to cause violent behavior. I think we should make these kinds of drugs available through prescription drugs, so that they can go to a safe place, get what they need, and remain productive citizens. Okay, what have we got here? Jay posted something in the chat room. Let's see. EU, the European Union passenger data measure. European Union's vote to set up a new system to gather and transmit passenger data. It should help law enforcement. Okay, that's according to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson, Jeh Johnson, requiring airlines to submit passenger data for all flights in and out of member nations. Covered data includes name, itinerary, contact information, and payment details. They had been reluctant to take this on because of security measures, which is actually something I'm wondering about. And they say it's an important tool for fighting terrorists and traffickers. You're getting a lot of information. Man, you've got to make sure that you're vetting this data properly. And I got to wonder about that. That would be my concern, that the data isn't adequately vetted. You get false positives. You're identifying an individual or perhaps some kind of a connection with a terrorist organization or whatever. Maybe they even tweeted something. I don't know. Contact information, itinerary. All right, I don't mind the name and itinerary so much. Payment details, I don't know. I am skeptical. I am skeptical about this kind of data gathering and data gathering system. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical that I would want to see that they've got a good way of vetting that information first. The false positive that I talked about in the previous story. You should know who's on your airplane, that's for sure. You have the screening. You have the pre-screening at the airport. That would be a better place, I would think. Pre-screening at the airport. So if you have any questions, you get those questions addressed at the airport. I guess that might be what this is designed to do. All right. I want to see the test. I want to see the trial runs on this. I want to see the trial runs so that it proves to be really successful. If it does prove to be really successful at trial runs, you do the trial first, see if the results are good, and if they are, okay, then you implement the program. Okay, could be useful. Let's see. Anything happening in the chat area? Got a knockdown. All my, here we go. WizMike Somebody has posted a story. Okay, you posted a story. The advertisement closed. The average. Oh, that's the one I'm talking. That's just the one I got over. Okay, thank you, Jay. BBC News. What's happening at? Not as the BBC. Apple should pay more tax, says Wozniak. Okay. All companies, including Apple, should pay a 50% tax rate. Wide-ranging interview. Wozniak was also ambivalent at the prospect of the UK leaving the European Union. All right. Found that Apple, along with Steve Jobs, worth about 600 billion, subject to a tax inquiry. Don't like the idea that Apple might be. I don't like the idea that Apple might be unfair, not paying taxes the way I would do as a person. Doesn't mind paying up to 50%. I think the top tax rate for an individual is 45% in the US, but I could be wrong. Apple channels most of its business through Europe, through a subsidiary in the Republic of Ireland. The tax rate is 12.5%. Compared to the tax rate for corporations being 20% in the UK. In the US, it's 35%. But 3 years ago, the company admitted 2 of its Irish subsidiaries pay a rate of only 2%. Okay. Tax avoidance, part of the Panama Papers revelations. The UK should be free to exit the European Union. That's a different kind of a topic. Okay, interesting. Tax avoidance. I don't know. Well, you should go to more of a flat tax for corporations. Get rid of a lot of the exemptions that you can take and make it a simpler tax. If in the end, I would be willing to go ahead with something like 15%, because a 50% tax, if all businesses paid a 50% tax, I guess I may be with the Republicans on this. That sounds like it'd be too high. 50% income tax. On tax avoidance, in fact, I would go so far as to say that we should give all the money they now have overseas in these tax shelters. I'd give them a break on it to get it back into the United States. I don't know. Difficult issue. I think 50% would be too high, and I would not tax a corporation the way I would tax an individual, because now we're talking about businesses using that, well, depending on how they use the income, but they're certainly going to use their income for workers, hiring more workers, etc. You have the problem, of course, if too much of the money, pay scales, inequality in pay scale, inequitability in pay scales, so that the income goes disproportionately to the chief executives. That needs to be addressed. That isn't fair. I don't know. 50% sounds too high, though. But somebody who knows a lot more about it than me could come up with a much fairer tax rate than what American businesses currently pay, since they can avoid paying income tax on so much of their income by sending it overseas. All right. Interesting story, Jay. Chat room. Okay. Let's see. One of the things I wanted to also talk about, and this is kind of a rant, this deals with prisons and prison systems. Yeah, gotta. My question being, what is the function of a prison? And you have two different approaches. You have Norway's approach. And Norway's approach focuses on rehabilitation. In Norway, the idea is everybody can be rehabilitated. There's no death penalty. An individual who is criminally insane, and specifically they're talking about this one particular serial killer, can be kept up incarcerated for the rest of their lives, but there is always the possibility they could be released. And also, the way they treat their prisoners in prison, their focus is on what they call humane treatment. So you have a guy who's a serial killer, and even this individual should be treated humanely. Should have a cell. He should have, I don't know how much he had, how much exposure. I don't know what he can. I think maybe he still is in that facility for maybe 23 hours out of the day. He's still in a room alone for 20 to 23 hours a day. He's prohibited from seeing other inmates, but his prison is still required to try and rehabilitate him. So rehabilitation is the focus. And this is a guy, he murdered some 69 people at a youth retreat, but even he should be treated humanely. The original sentence was 21 years, which is the maximum sentence. But since he is judged criminally insane, he's probably going to get locked up for the rest of his life. I don't know exactly what the process for proving you've been rehabilitated is, but for someone like him, I think it's unlikely. However, he still gets to watch television, and he can still enroll on online university courses. Let's see. The United States has 2.5 million prisoners, 3,000 of them on death row, 5,000 serving life sentences without parole. That's the United States system, which is opposite. And originally it says up until, I don't know, what, maybe the 80s or so, 70s or 80s, the United States focus was also on rehabilitation, but that changed. It changed to a get tough on crime policy. In the 70s, most U.S. prisons focused on rehabilitation, but then the philosophy changed to tough on crime. Let's see. Prisoners came up with creative ways for people to feel more pain, to suffer more while in prison. The prisons came up with creative ways it was punishment, punishing people, solitary confinement. we're getting some rollback. Okay, so what it comes down to is since the 70s, the American focus being on punishment, whereas in Norway, smaller country, you can't compare the two. But if you look at the recidivism rate, how many prisoners, once they get released, wind up back in prison, in the United States, it's over 70%. In Norway, it's 20%. The difference being their focus on rehabilitation, the American system being in, let's lock up these people, let's keep them, make sure they're incarcerated, treating them less humanely, I guess. And the whole point of this particular story being, yes, we should focus on rehabilitation. Now, why do you put someone in prison in the first place? Well, one is safety of the public safety. This particular individual has done something. They've committed a crime which shows they caused harm to the public. All right. So that's why you send them off to prison in the first place. Public safety. Okay. At the same time, of course, the sentence depends on how much harm they've done to the public. And the sentence is based on that. So the more harm you've done to the public, the more time you're going to spend in prison. But the question really should be, you've got an individual that's a criminal. What will it take to rehabilitate that individual? So you can send them off to jail. You should have rehabilitation programs in the prisons, and the idea would be, once that prisoner has demonstrated to some degree that he's been rehabilitated, you then send them back into the public. Now, I'm not talking about a serial killer, but the length of the prison stay should be based on the degree to which the individual is showing that they have been rehabilitated. So the focus, instead of punishing a person, and I think our focus in the United States is punishing that individual, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, based on punishing them for the crimes they've committed. And what happens in the United States then is, whether it's 10 years or whatever, they come out and they go back, and 70% of them go right back to committing crime. Inefficient system, very expensive for maintaining these individuals in prison itself. But if you can rehabilitate them, you lower the prison population, you wind up with more productive citizens, you wind up with spending much less money on our prison system. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Jay had a question about a book that's in Amazon. Okay. The new case for gold. We have a Dale Liebrecht, and we had this discussion, I don't know, maybe even a year ago, about gold, going to gold standard. Gold, invest your money in gold. in the long run, not really a particularly good idea. So I say in general, anything like going to the gold standard, bad idea. Okay, who's this particular author? James Rickards, editor of Strategic Alliance Financial Letter, for which he is the director. It's his own little newsletter. From what I'm reading here, I'm not too supportive of his ideas. That's the best way I can put it at this point. Blah, blah, blah. His clients include institutional investors. I think this is the guy I was talking about with Dale. Best book ever. Let's take a look at a review. Blah, blah, blah. Currency wars, death of money. Cognitive arguments for owning gold in all economic environments, demonstrating once again he's a master storyteller. Well, he is a storyteller, I give you that. Now, what happened is, I forget when, we had the economic crisis. In an economic crisis, not necessarily a bad idea to get off money and to go into something like gold during that period of time. And gold skyrocketed. But if you look at gold prices over like 50 years or so, not really all that great. And you can lose your shirt in the gold market. Let's see. Gold. Let me try to type. Gold prices over the last 50 years. Historical prices of gold, 100-year chart. Let us see. Okay, I'm going to screen share this. All right. And as you can see, it tends to be all over the map. Up and down, up and down, up, 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 up. Over 2,000, down, 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 down. 400 again, up, 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 up. Almost 1,800, and down, 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 down to 1,100. It's not a stable market. You like anything else, you can, when the economy goes bad, maybe you go ahead and put some money in the gold. But it's not a stable market. And the guy that's writing this book, he sells gold. That's what he does. So, he's self-promoting. Self-promoting, that's what it is. So, ain't buying the book there, Jay. Sorry. I'm a hemming and a hawing here. I think I've reached the end of all the stories. Let's see. Anything else? Jay's the active guy in the chat room. He's the active guy in the Hangout. Doing a great there. Jay's the worker, the super guy. I tend to not follow the chat room that much. Let's see. WizMike had a link, YouTube link. The best of Soupy Sales. Okay. Okay, Soupy Sales. Very funny guy. Queen Elizabeth on her 90th birthday. First British monarch to reach the age of 90. Since the royal family, I don't really think they have much influence at all in politics. Like everybody else, they have their opinions, but since they've been removed from the political process, the question is the amount of money that the government of England spends. Actually, I think maybe I don't know. Let's see. I know she has a lot of money being the queen. She is the queen. The royal family has buckets and buckets of money. Is that inherited money? Source of England means wealth. That's it. Excuse me. How wealthy is the queen? Apparently, the Telegraph tells us she's not as rich as we think. Let's see. Queen Elizabeth. She might be one of the most influential women in the world. I kind of question that. But she's worth, come on, she's actually worth 277 million pounds, which is only 3% of the wealth of the richest Briton, the guy named, oh, that's the Duke of Westminster. Well, he's in the royal family too. So we're talking about the royal family. That's misleading. Okay, I gotta make my search terms better. England's royal family. That's really being I mean, they are a great tourist attraction. I guess they, the English, let's say British royal family is financed mainly by hereditary revenues of the crown estates. So it's hereditary wealth. So, okay, so the royal family's hereditary wealth pays for their upkeep. Okay. Let's see. Until 1760, and met all their official expenses from hereditary wealth. Now, let's see. In modern times, the government's profits from the crown estates always significantly exceeded the crown list. Crown list. It's an arrangement persisted from 1760, 2012. So she's getting 7.9 million a year from this civil list. Total income from the royal household from the treasury is significantly larger. Household income from the treasury, something called grants and aid from the treasury, and revenues from the Duchies of Cornwall, and other, let's see, what's grant? Sovereign grant. System of funding the royal household. Blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really give me a whole lot of details. Let's see this. Crown estate. What is this grant? What is this civil list business? List of individuals who money is paid to by the government. So she gets like 8 million. But that doesn't seem to, so that is money she gets paid. Pensions, let me back up. So she's still relying on the crown estate. Let me take a look at the crown estate. Collection of land and holdings belonging to the monarchy as a corporate soul. Corporate and soul, two words that don't necessarily go together. That's a royal conspiracy. Maintaining the royal family. I mean, this crown estate, I'd almost say that's inherent. I'm against inherited wealth. So I would say that should be subject to inheritance tax, just like any other estate. Shouldn't make any difference if it's the Queen of England or anybody getting it. You should have inherited wealth should be taxed. I don't mind if you say, okay, 50% of the income goes to a spouse. Okay, fair enough. When the spouse dies, maybe you say 50% of that estate gets distributed to the kids. Okay, kids die, that's it. At that point, the entire state would have been subject to tax. So in this particular case, the royal estate is not subject to inheritance tax. And I would say that's wrong. I would immediately tax that entire crown estate and force the queen to live on a measly $8 million a year. Poor queen in the royal family. I think they can find a way to manage. I would say, okay, maybe you say the upkeep of, where they live, their residence, serves as a tourist attraction. Okay, so maybe the upkeep on that residence, the government takes care of that because they're bringing in tourist dollars. Anything else? What do you have? WizMike. WizMike in that chat area. What is WizMike talking about? Oh my God. WizMike is talking about Noah's Ark theme park destroyed by a flood. Oh boy. This new theme park in Williamston, Kentucky was destroyed by a flood earlier today. From a meteorological standpoint, it is quite confusing. There were no storms in the area. Son of a gun, an act of God. Why did God forsake me? I don't know. Son of a gun. That's pretty ironic, I think, actually. Interesting story, Mike. Yeah, let's find out. You know what they should do? What they should do is they say, okay, look at the tax revenues, look at the revenues generated by tourists coming to Buckingham Palace. They know how much money is coming in. Okay. What is the cost of maintaining Buckingham Palace? X. Government pays for it. What is the difference? How much of a difference is there? Now, if there's a significant difference, I don't know, 10 millions or whatever, okay, maybe you give the royal family, they're entertainers. The Queen's in it, so they're for their entertainment value. Maybe you throw them a couple of bucks. Give them a bonus. If they're doing stuff to increase tourism, hey, throw them a couple of bucks. Now you have the whole business of the colonies, where the royal family goes out and visit the colonies, and those, and I don't know. I can't. It's completely against the American experience, so I don't know. Let's take a look at what popularity. Just how popular is the British royal family? How popular is the British royal family in England? I should qualify it. Popularity polls. Popularity polls. Record support, according to The Guardian, but that was in 2012. Let's see. Popular across society, 2015. What have we got here? The royal family is awesome. Let's see. I should say 2016, they got a qualifier. Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Royal family remain as an asset to Britain, according to the Daily Express. Okay. Force for good. One of the few institutions making Britain look good. Blah, blah, blah. Talking about popular. They don't talking about how popular she actually is. They're making a case. Okay, that didn't. A particular search. Popular across. Well, we all go to 15. September of 1915. This is okay. Approval ratings. I will. Actually, I should have been sharing this in the chat area. I will put it in the chat area. Anybody who wants to look at it. Then I will screen share it. Okay, that's pretty good. All right. The Brits like it. 88 cons. Conservatives absolutely loving her and enthralled with the royal family. 88% approval rating. Labor, okay, now you'd think Labor would say thumbs down, but even Labor, 57%. Whoops, what is it? 50%, 57% say it's good for England. Liberal Democrats, I don't know who these people are. The Independents, I guess, Independents. By age, 18 to 24, 60% popularity, 80% popularity, over 60%. So, okay. Well, the Brits love her, so none of my beeswax. Okay, what do we got here? What else we got? Since people are still with me, let me look at, let's see. I'm going to just start going through the news here. See if there's anything interesting happening. My favorite go-to page is Christian Science Monitor, and I'm an atheist, but they really have the most balanced reporting. Closed form primary, a warped democracy. And let's see. I will screen share this also into the chat area for anybody in the chat room wants to read it. And I will screen share it as well in the Hangout. Okay, it's in the chat area there. Okay. Political parties choose their nominees, but with more Americans opting out of the parties, the process representative of what America wants. So we're talking about whether or not only Democrats vote in Democratic primaries and only Republicans vote in Republican primaries, or should independents be allowed to choose to vote for whoever they want? We got a woman here. She's a vocal supporter of Donald Trump, but she's a registered Democrat. She missed the deadline to switch her registration to become a Republican 6 months ago. Well, too bad. Sorry. And now she's bewildered by what she says is a complicated backroom system of electing party delegates both in her own state and across the country. All right. It's antiquated, she says. It's just expletive bigwigs and mucky mucks. I don't know about that. In truth, presidential primaries have never been more open. Since 1972, primaries have gone from being providence of party bosses to vibrant voter-driven contests. This year, the populist revolt in both parties is more open than ever before. After all, are not democratic. They choose their nominees based on whichever way they think is best. Okay, well, we don't have a vibrant third-party system yet, so here's the point. Now, with a greater number of independents, you have a growing number of independents. It means that more Americans are not becoming, a growing number of Americans are not becoming eligible, are not taking part in the process of selecting the nominees. That is true. And Mike in the chat room, he wants open caucuses. Okay. And this article says the irony is that America is less partisan. Research suggests that the growing ranks of independents are just as partisan as the parties. These voters have just abandoned parties because they are ashamed by how the parties act. So this research suggests that it wouldn't make a bit of difference. The independents that are conservative, they're going to vote for conservative candidates, and the independents that are more liberal are going to vote for the more liberal candidates, just exactly as the people in the parties do. They had a problem. Brooke shouldn't laugh. They had a problem in Brooklyn. Irregularities. 125,000 Democratic voters were incorrectly purged from the polls. Now, this is just dumb, stupid, and idiotic and wrong, completely wrong. Other states have long given power to the parties and to the establishment. Who has the higher voting turnout? States that have early voting, states that have mail-in ballots and same registration. I completely agree. Blah, blah, blah. I know I read some of the reasons that voters had been taken off the polls, taken off the voter registration polls. One is they had moved. I'm not sure how the registration office determined they had moved, but they moved out of a borough. So they went to vote in a borough. Apparently they were not living in, and so they were not allowed to vote. Well, if you're living in the city, it's a city primary, shouldn't make a bit of difference what borough you happen to live in. They also had people, now I don't know, they sent notices. The voter registration offices sent notices out. Apparently they do that. I don't know what kind of notice. I got something in the mail from my voting registration office that said, do I want to become either a Democrat or Republican? Apparently they know I'm an independent. Okay. And I don't know if it's the same thing, but possibly it's something like that. And in New York, if the voter registration office didn't get a response back 2 elections in a row, they zapped you from the list, which is stupid. So you just threw it away in the garbage pail. That shouldn't make a bit of difference. But apparently, people were turned away because they hadn't bothered, answering the mail notice. Let's see. Party primary rules de-enfranchise those who most dislike the parties. I don't know. It's certainly true that on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders is doing better in the open primaries as opposed to the closed one. The open primaries where independents can vote for him. Maybe even in some cases Republicans can cross a go across party lines and vote for him. I agree that independents should be allowed to vote in whichever primary they want, Democrat or Republican. That should be up to them. Democrats voting in the Republican primary, I would be against that. I would say no. Let's see, we've got something happening in the chat area. First, let me check to see if Ed. Okay. Let's see. In the chat area, Mike says no ID, just sign in. Voter ID is just for, and I can't really, unfortunately, read the rest of that. Okay. Now, okay, I'm going crazy here. Let's see. Changing from, okay. Jay has given me a link, which I will go to. Just finished talking about, wow, Jay is just loading up the chat area. Jay's getting ahead of me here, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Let's see. Where was I? Chat area. Voter ID. Okay. I think when you go to register, I don't mind requirement of having either a voter ID or some way, perhaps some other way of identifying the fact that you're a resident of a city or state. You want to vote in a city election? You should be able to prove in some way, shape, or form that in fact you live in the city. You're a resident of the city. I don't know who couldn't do that. I mean, you could do it. You do it with the electric bill. The electric bill shows you're a resident of the city. I guess it would be if you're a homeless person. But maybe if you're a homeless person, you could still register at maybe a shelter or something. And the shelter gives you some kind of identification, sends you a card or something and says that, yes, John Jones is living in this shelter. But I think you should have some way of, when you go to register, some way of verifying that you are in fact a resident of the city for city elections, you're a resident of the state for a state election, or you're well, U.S. citizen. Doesn't make a bit of difference where you live. But when you go to actually vote, you say, I'm Ed Dyer. Okay. They look on their little register and they say, yes, Ed Dyer, such and such a place. And then they check off, Ed Dyer has voted. That should be good enough. Now, if someone else comes along and says, I'm Ed Dyer, now they got a problem. I don't, and I've not read where that is in fact a problem. I think at that point, what they can do is they can put it aside and say, wait a second, we got a problem here, and they can follow up on it. Maybe some sort of provisional vote or something, I'm not sure. But it's not a problem as far as I know. And if it's not a problem, then why worry about it? Let's see, Mike. So I don't object to some form of identification that tells you, that identifies you as being a resident of a city or a state for a city or state election. My God, Jay's filling up. He's filling up the chat area. He's been researching stories here. We had a science-looking one. Okay, changing the frontiers of science. I will go with that one. Okay, I will share that in the chat room. Don't need to share it in the Hangout because Jay has already posted it, but I will screen share it simply so you don't have to look at the top of my head. Okay. Here we go. Condensed version. Presentation. Lux partner Josh Wolf. National Academy of Sciences. Cutting-edge science is being conducted at a growing rate outside of traditional institutions at startups funded by entrepreneurs and funded by venture capitalists. Going based of citizen scientists. This is not new. Let's see. One can argue that capital markets lack the incentive to do pure science. I should start marking these. Okay. Large-scale undertakings, AIDS epidemic, war on cancer, man on the moon. We're encountering the spillover effects that come from endeavors daily. The key government-directed initiative. One can also argue biotech has boomed, not because of random genius, but because of this act. Bob Dole got involved. Birchby and Bob Dole. Publicly funded research got patented, tons of spin-offs. NASA has had bunches and bunches of spin-offs. The opposite can also be argued. Einstein commit lost in the White House mail, and the Manhattan Project would have never started. Before World War II and the Cold War, science was mostly, so it's private funding versus public funding. Well, certainly, it's a long article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Certainly, we are seeing more private funding, in particular with space programs. So it's certainly true that we're seeing more startups help as citizen scientists, big promoter of citizen scientists, work being done outside of government funding. Government funding can present a problem in that there might be a political bias to it. Okay. There are a lot of grants. Places like Harvard, I don't know, they don't have to worry about funding programs. They've got billions of dollars in grants. So the universities, bigger universities, Caltech, MIT, they have no problem with funding. They can fund all kinds of projects. In space is the area where I see more private funding taking place. And that's because NASA losing its funding. So that's a good trend. We're seeing private enterprise picking up the slack. SpaceX, etc. That is a good idea. Okay, what else we got here? Look in the chat area. Hi, buddy Mike. What's Mike saying? I don't know what Mike's saying. Something's wrong with my... I'm seeing a lot more cases here. No, I'm not. Okay. Sorry. Up to date in the chat area. All right. Let's see what we got from Jay here. Got 2 stories. We got some cultural. I know Jay is studying psychology. China builds nuclear plants for the South Sea. What are you going to do? China's certainly got the right to build nuclear power plants. They're obviously trying to intimidate Japan, countries they share the South Sea with. They've already built up what amounts to a base, a seawall. So they're basically moving in and saying, this is our territory. That's, yep. Nuclear power plants, I got no problem with. Wait a minute. Maritime nuclear power platforms could one day be used to support Chinese projects in the disputed. Well, because they're building nuclear power plants. Okay, that's fine. Let's see, what is this? This is the mischief reef. So they're building it on reefs, building it over water. All right, that's a little bit problematical. If I lived in Japan, I'd be a little bit worried, perhaps. The Chicago Maroon. Cultural differences. Well, cities, big cities, have many different cultures living in them. Where is this taking place? That's what I wanted. Is this taking place in the United States, in the city of Chicago, or is it taking place in Spain? Let's see. Doesn't really tell me. Not sure. Probably it's taking place in Chicago, which would certainly not be a problem. Cultural heritage and all. It's a dramatic. It shows. It's a real problem. This cultural and language problem between different cultures in the same country, such as Spain. You don't tell a Catalonian that they live in, they're from Spain. They're not. Their entire heritage, and they think of themselves as being from whatever region they're born into, whatever region they're in. That's where they live. That's what they are. That's their identification, not someone from Spain. You see that, I know, in Italy as well. Can't think of too many other countries. The main one I think of is Spain. Oh, Belgium, where you have the two populations, the Dutch population and the German population, Flemish and the Walloons, where it's so bad that the prime minister, I guess it is, he speaks in English. So he doesn't have to choose one or the other. It's a real barrier. And I don't like that idea at all. I like the idea of people knowing more than one language. Let's see. We have Jay posted in the chat area here in the Hangout. Languages and borders. Catalan is one of 4 official languages of Spain, Basque, Spanish, and Galician. I can't pronounce that word, sorry. Pockets and speakers in France, Italy, France and Italy. Okay. While the use of Catalonian was severely repressed during Franco's reign, the language has survived and experienced resurgence in recent years. Now, the thing is, if you're learning it along with Spanish, everyone living in Spain should know how to speak Spanish, Spanish being, the language of the country. It's a problem if you have the people in one district, their kids, they learn that one language, the adults learn that one language, that's all they speak in the district, and now you're creating barriers between the different districts. I know some of these districts, they want to be independent. They don't want to be part of Spain or Italy or Canada even for a while. Although in Canada, that movement is the French movement to separate the French-speaking part of Canada from the English-speaking part of Canada. That's really quieted down a great deal. But I see, I mean, this is a barrier. Same thing, United States. You come to your children. I can understand an adult immigrates to the United States, primarily knows their language, has to learn English. They should know both English and their own language. But in their home, they speak their own language. And with the children, they speak their own language. But the children goes to school. The children learn English. And eventually, the children are probably going to move out of home. They're going to move someplace else. But if you have a district where you don't have integration, where districts are not integrating themselves with each other, it's a real barrier and a real problem. So people should honor their traditions, but it shouldn't be a barrier to integrations when you talk of integrating into a culture. I think that it can be a bad idea if you restrict yourself to the area you live in just one culture. It's a real barrier. If you have two communities, I don't know what the present state is in New York City. You had the Hasidic Jew section, and you had Spanish neighborhoods, and these two cultures, you had real clashes because there is no integration, very little integration. The Hasidic Jews want to immerse themselves in their culture. They don't want their children. Well, I don't know. I don't know how true this is, how accurate this is, but my perception is they don't want their children becoming too involved in cultures outside of the Hasidic Jewish culture. So it's a real barrier. I know, for instance, let's see. Jay in the chat area has been to Brooklyn, been on the street, rode a bike, didn't seem to interact with other people. That's the neighborhoods. That's very true in some neighborhoods. Where you see that is where a neighborhood has retained its ethnic and cultural identity. Probably unavoidable, but it's much better, particularly the kids move out, the kids interact, they become more integrated with the rest of society, and I don't know how you can stop it. I don't know how you can avoid having these very distinct ethnic neighborhoods. It's only a problem where people don't interact with people outside their community. I know if you go back to the 20s and 30s, the hometown I was born in, Stamford, Connecticut, very ethnic. Both my grandmothers were Irish, and they lived in the Irish section of Stamford, Connecticut. And an Irish kid walking in an Italian neighborhood might not be greeted too friendly, vice versa. And I mean, people hate it. Well, the kids. So you had an Irish kid started going out with an Italian kid. Parents did not like that at all. And Mike is signing off. Good night, Mike. Nice talking to you. And Mike is gone, but Jay is still in there. He's still in the chat area. I don't know if Rox is still here. I don't know. Particularly that's why I want public schools. I don't like private schools. I want public schools. Private schools tend to create a more segregated environment. Only Jewish kids going to Jewish schools, Jewish kids going to Jewish schools, Catholic kids going to Catholic schools, Japanese kids going to Japanese schools. That's a bad idea. Your choice. You got the money. You want to send your kid to a private school. It's your money. There should be absolutely zero public support of private schools, however. Okay, two things are happening here. The old man's losing his voice. And the old man, his bladder is acting up. So I am going to sign off. Going to stop the broadcast. I'll tell you what, it'd be great having you here, Jay. You've really given me a lot of stories. You've been involved in the conversation here. So thank you for showing up in our Hangout. Hopefully you will also show up in our Hangout next week. Don't worry about saying anything. You've said everything in the chat area. I've been dancing here. What am I going to talk about? And you're posting interesting stories. So that's great. I'm going